What if everything we are going through is all part of the plan? What if everything we are going through right now is to bring the plan of creation to a finish? See, in the grand scheme of things, eternity is forever. Eternity being endless, that's like trillions upon trillions of countless years. So in the grand scheme of things, 1,000 years, a few thousand years, a billion years is nothing compared to eternity. With that being said, the push is on, the big push. People talk about the last days and tribulation and the signs of the time and the birth pains of tribulation, of the things that happen right before tribulation. Well, if that's the case, I would have to say, based on my studies and based on what God has given me, we are at the end of the birth pangs. The power of the contractions are so strong right now, it is ridiculous. Event on top of event, things on top of things happen, and Bible prophecy being fulfilled on a level we have not seen before since the beginning of time, since the creation, or the beginning of creation. Iran will attack. It's going to happen. Israel will attack. It's going to happen. Russia, Ukraine, Poland, and so forth. China. Eventually, it'll all happen. But it's not the traditional attacks. Those are normal, Iran, they basically broadcasting what they're going to do. We're going to attack you in so many days. The United States does it. Israel did it. Countless other nations have done it. Because it's part of the program nowadays. Iran will attack. So will Israel. But those are normal. It's the unscheduled attacks, the ones that are not normal, the ones that come out of nowhere. And you're like, wait a minute, who was that? And what they did, what? That keeps people in an uproar. Those are things that ignite fires. People say, you know what, we got to get involved. Those are the things we have to watch out for. They broadcast everything nowadays. Even our country, we broadcast stuff in movies. We tell you what we're going to do before we do it. And you see it in movies. And anybody that's a movie buff that have been watching movies over the last 3 decades will tell you there's a lot of truth to that. You see something in the movies, and then eventually, some years later, you see it happening in real life. Now they've gone to the point of really telling you what's going on. When you look at the movie Leave the World Behind that was made last year, kind of basically telling you, well, what could happen if this situation happens? That situation is going to happen, but not like it did in the movie. It's going to be a little different. It's going to be a little bit different. Now, I talk about the things that are happening, the things that are coming on us. And anybody that's been paying attention to my videos, I keep saying judgment is coming upon the United States unless we turn back to God. I keep saying judgment is coming because that's what I feel, right? But why? Why do people say that? Why do they say of all the nations? Because all the nations do dirt. People all over the world do dirt. But why America? Why should we face judgment, right? Let's look at our history. Let's look at what we've done. Let's look at what we've exported to the nations that we call societal norms, the moral code. Look at abortion rates over the last few decades. And I'm not coming out against women and their use of body and them being able to have the right to choose what happens with their bodies. I'm just pointing out certain facts here. The abortion rate right now is astronomical. When you look at the amount of babies that were taken out of there, it's a monumental number. Now, I do believe that, all life is life given by God. Even if it comes from some of the worst circumstances, God can bring some beautiful things out of the worst circumstances. I've seen that, right? But if you take the number of children that have been aborted over the last, say, just 2 years alone, take that same number and you say, okay, Joe, Bob, and Willie killed this many people, or this nation killed that many people over the last 2 years. Regular adults, people walking across the street or whatnot, or just living their lives. People will be in the uproar. People will be nutting up. But because somebody says, well, that's not really life, it changes things. So I'm not here to debate that, whether it is life or not life. I'm just speaking about the abortion rate. Now you look at sex and the whole topic of sex and what it means. It's supposed to be something between a man and a woman. And I, for one, want to tell you, I indulged way too much in that before I got married. And I thank God that I walked away from that without any lasting marks that will stick with you forever, There are all those spiritual markers because you make a soul tie with everyone you have sex with. Everyone. A soul tie is made. You got to break those soul ties if you haven't already, so. You look at how sex is looked at nowadays, how prevalent it is in society, how prevalent it is in our media, in our movies, our TV shows today. When I was growing up, and Luke Skywalker and the 2 Live Crew made music, they had to put a sticker on it, parental advisory. When you had Too Short, you put a parental advisory on it. And your kids had a hard time getting a hold of that stuff. We did. Don't get it wrong. Don't get it twisted. We got a hold of it. But it wasn't so readily, easily accessible. Today, with the internet and with all the different websites and different search engines and everything, you can find anything. And these kids are exposed to so much more nowadays than we ever have when we were kids, and way more than our parents were when they were kids. And we've taken back 100 years or a couple 100 years, whole different world. The exposure today is way past any standard of what God would consider acceptable in the sinful world. The violence. Look at how violent the world has gotten. Look at how violent people have gotten, and the love that people used to have for each other you just don't see anymore. The love for the community, the love for the village, the love for the neighborhood. People still lay their hood, but you don't have the unity that you used to have. Grandma don't sit on the porch like she used to. You might see that a few places here and there, but you don't see it like you used to see it. Some of y'all young folks don't understand. When I came up, people was out, they sat on the porch. Our elders was out there on the block. You was out there acting a fool, you was about to get snatched up by a few people on the way home. Then when you got home, you gonna catch it again because I went and told them, I just had to snatch your child up because your child was out there doing this. Because it takes a village to raise a child, not just 2 parents. It takes a village, a community, a family. It's so much deeper than what society is telling us or saying is the acceptable code. We've been allowing these kids to have exposure on levels that they should not have. The societal level that says is okay, the moral code is not cool. The secular world wants glory. They want all the glory. That makes the secular world an enemy of God. And that is the truth. Read the word. It's in the word. A secular world, the world we live in right now, as secular as it is an enemy of God because it allows and condones and accepts different things that are not of God, period. God had a certain way when he wanted us to live. We threw that out the window when we ate the apple in the first place, right? Now we have to deal with the rest of this whole process, playing itself out. But we get a chance to live in eternity with peace, love, and joy, not knowing pain, not having to knowing pain and strife as something from the past, not having to deal with it on an everyday basis anymore because we are in a different body. We're in a different state of living, a state of being. We are all spirit beings, whether we have the flesh, skin, or not. And our spirits will go on for eternity. The question is where you want your spirit to be for eternity. That's why I do what I do. But yeah, the secular world is the enemy of God. And the secular world wants all the glory. But God gets the glory. God gets the glory. Period. You look at how the secular world is all about me and my desires and what I want, regardless of the next person, regardless of what God wants. God said, I just want you to acknowledge me. I just want you to come to me. People say, no, I don't even want you. So you're entitled. You can do whatever you want to do because the beautiful thing about this is God gave us free will. The angels don't have that. He gave us free will. So you have the right to do whatever you want to do. You have the right to step on people. You have the right to curse people. You have the right to murder people. You have to do all these things, but with that being said, these things you're doing have a repercussion. There's consequences and repercussions for everything. You murder somebody, you're going to get dealt with. You rape somebody, you're going to get dealt with. You curse somebody, you're going to get dealt with. One way or the other, the check will come due. Please believe it. If we have an all-seeing, all-knowing, all-powerful God that really is up there, and I know he is. I know he is. But back to what I was saying, if we have an all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful God that's up there watching everything we do, then best believe if he says the price will be paid, the price will be paid. Now, some of us get to avoid paying that price by giving our lives and accepting our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and giving God our all. And it's the whole essence of us being here is to serve him, right? We messed up. He made a way. He gave us his son. His son took our sin on his back for us. Because God loves us so much. So he made a way for us to come back to him. All we got to do is accept him and serve him. It's not saying you have to live holy 24/7 because it's not really possible while you're in the flesh. Sin's going to creep in your head. Thoughts are going to creep in your head. You're going to have different things pop up from your past because, let's face it, you're still in the flesh. And sin is in the flesh. But we yearn for that time period when we're in the spirit and when we're with God forever. That's what I'm looking forward to, man. The beautiful blessings we have down here of walking with him are amazing, but nothing compared to eternity with him. Now, if you want to look at some of the other things we're doing, we export The world looks at what we do here in America, and they model themselves after us. If I want to say one thing as an example of how the world models themselves after us, rap music. I ain't got to say nothing else. You see rap everywhere nowadays. That's not saying rap is bad or anything like that. Rap is a form of art. It's how you use it. Just like singing. It's a form of art, but it's how you use it. You can use rap to lift up people. You can use rap to lift up God. You can use rap to just lift the unconscious of people. You know what I'm saying? Get people thinking about things. But when you start using rap or any other music to degrade people, to bring people down, to make people feel like they're less than nothing, then you are doing the devil's work. Not God's work, you're doing the devil's work. Whether you think you're doing it to get a paycheck to feed your family, the fact of the matter is, you're still doing the devil's work. When you break people down, when you degrade people, when you make people feel like less than their worth, when you don't tell people about the goodness of God and how much He loves us and how much He cares for us, when you tell people that they're nothing, you're telling people exactly the opposite of what God is saying. Therefore, you're moving against God. So you're walking with the devil when you do that. You're in the two ways about it, either walking with God or you're not. And if you're not walking with God, you're subject to anything. But I digress. Right now, we live in what I would consider the last days, right? The Bible talks about the last days and how people will be changing, how people will be lovers of money and lovers of themselves rather than lovers of God. They'll follow after their own lustful fleshly desires rather than God's desires. And that goes beyond, it's not just, when you say lustful fleshly desires, it's not just talking about sex, because you can lust after video games. You can lust after a certain way of life. You can lust after money and cars and stuff like that. You can also lust after being something other than what God made you to be. I will never be the person to tell someone you can't live how you want to live. I will never be the person to say, if you're a boy and you want to be a girl, if you're a man and you want to be a woman, or you're a woman and you want to be a man, that's your life. Do what you want to do. All I can do is tell you what the words say, because your life is about you, and that's your walk with God. I can't condone your walk, and I wouldn't try to tell you how to walk. All I can give you is what the word says. And you take what the word says from there, because God going to convict you, and He going to talk to you about it. And if you're listening, you're going to hear Him, if you're listening. But God said we would leave the natural use of our body for the unnatural. He said that would be prevalent in the last days, which is one of the things you're seeing right now. So when you have little kids talking about transitioning, you have no idea how much that upsets God. When you have people pushing kids to transition their gender while they're not even at the age of understanding yet, you are so far against God you don't even realize it. Read the word. It's in His word. Talk to Him and ask Him about it and see what He says to you. He said, whatever you do to the least of my children, whatever you do to the least of my children. He said millions of times in the Bible, take care of my children. Watch out for my babies. You do something bad to my babies, it's coming on you. You may think you're doing them a favor, or you may think you're doing them a great service because they identify a certain way, because they want to identify a certain way. But if we believe in an all-powerful, all-knowing God, then it doesn't make sense that an all-knowing, all-powerful God would make you something other than what you're meant to be. It doesn't make sense. Our actions are on us because we allow sin into this world, but He made us a certain way. He made us to be like Him, and He made us in His image. So to change His image, once again, is going against His will for your life. And that's biblical. That's word. That is not my thought process, not another person's thought process. That's in the word. Get in the word and see what He says. He talks a lot about the unnatural use of the body. And I'm not coming against people. I'm not trying to come against people. I'm trying to come against a way of life and a system that is pushing us towards the end of days, pushing us further into the end of days and towards the period of tribulation. As long as we have the breath of life, when He talks to us, we have the chance to turn things back, just like when you had the April 8th eclipse. That wasn't just an eclipse, and it wasn't the end of the world, and it wasn't calling down the rapture. What the eclipse was a message. It was a sign to tell people, hey, pay attention to what's going on. I'm talking to you. If you notice, the eclipse was on April 8th. Then in New Jersey, right before that, there was an earthquake that measured at 4.8. So I started looking up 4.8 and 4.8 and what does it mean and what is it all about? And 4.8 is actually very important in the book of Exodus. It talks about it in the book of Exodus. It literally says, well, since they didn't believe the first sign and they didn't believe your witness when you came to talk to them and tell them what it was, I think they're going to believe in this second sign. And I'm paraphrasing here what the word says. I'm breaking it down for the way you understand it. But basically it says, they didn't believe the first sign. They didn't believe your witness, your testimony. Maybe they'll believe the second sign. But the way it's written, it's almost like, I'm pretty sure they're going to pay attention to the second sign. So that means that second sign has got to be something monumental, ominous. So that's what I got from this particular eclipse. When you take it back, and we compared this in the previous videos to Jonah in the belly of the whale, when he was going to Nineveh, he had to deliver a message to Nineveh. The message delivered to Nineveh, when he finally went to deliver the message, he told Nineveh, you got 40 days. You got 40 days to turn things around or it's a wrap. People in Nineveh said, oh, snap, let me get things together. So they started working on getting right with God and getting rid of idols and all this other stuff, right? And they got right with God. And God said, you know what? I'm going to chill. I love y'all. Peace be still. Peace be unto you. But if you start nutting up again, you know what I got to do. Judgment's still right there. I'm trying to love on y'all. I'm trying to bring y'all home the right way. But if y'all want to go that route, that's on y'all. So they was good to go. 40 days passed. They was still alive. Didn't last too long. 148 years later, Nineveh ceased to exist. They went back to their pagan ways, went back to their idols, went back to their debauchery and the way they wanted to live, and God handled it as he said he would. And he gave them warning then too. They ain't listen. Just like the days of Noah, he gave those people warnings. They didn't listen. Noah was the only one to listen. Noah built the ark and everything. And then the flood came. They were like, Noah, let me in, let me in. Noah like, yeah, I can't. Sodom and Gomorrah. He smote Sodom and Gomorrah. And he said, if there's 10 righteous men here, I won't do it. Okay, if it's 5 righteous men, I won't do it. Not 5. Okay, 1. That one was Lot. That one person, Lot, was able to save many people, was able to bring them out with him because that one man, Lot, was righteous. What happened to the rest of Sodom and Gomorrah, though? He smote it. Done deal. When I look at the eclipse of April 8th, to me, it is the sign of Nineveh, the sign of Jonah in the belly of the whale. By the way, during the eclipse, and this is actually prophetic, they said during one of the signs of the latter days, they were going to see the sign of Jonah. Jesus said, there's a perverse generation that seeks a sign, but no sign will be given them except the sign of Jonah in the belly of the whale. And during this eclipse, we had exactly that, Jonah in the belly of the whale in the sky and the constellations. You even had Cetus, which is the fish, which is the sign of the whale, right there sitting above Jonah during the eclipse. You can't make this stuff up. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of other stuff I could break down about the eclipse that ties in, that tells you what time it really is, and that the eclipse really is a sign and a message to us. But then we'll be here for hours. I'm trying to keep this under 20 minutes. So yeah, if we talk about the age of understanding for children going back to transitioning and everything, let's think about that for a second. The age of understanding is not 10 years old. It's not even 12 years old nowadays, because you understand so much, but then there's so many other things you don't really understand. And then when you are in a position where you can't really see spiritually, your understanding takes that much longer. Now, if you think about modern day society, you can't join the army until you're 18. You can't buy a drink till you're 21. You can't buy a cigarette till you're 18 or 21 in certain states. You can't drive a car until you're 16. Why can't you drive a car until you're 16 years old? Because they don't think you'll be responsible enough to be able to handle it. Even though at 10, 11, 12 years old, you were driving cars on the back road and stuff like that. You were driving cars in the parking lot and stuff like that, learning from your parents and like we all did. However, that does not mean you're ready to be behind the wheel on the road. And every parent knows this. When you put your kid behind the wheel, you give them the keys and you let them go, you sitting there worried and freaking out like, Lord, I pray they make it home safely, they don't get no car accidents. And a lot of times, most people, when they have most of their accidents, most of their reckless situations, when they're young, because they are still immature. So with that being said, we're talking about a young, immature, young adult. If they're not mature enough to really be able to handle those things like being behind the wheel, how the heck they're going to decide their gender, their sexual orientation, when they're not even supposed to be exploring that type of stuff until they're older? These are the things I talk about. We're exposing these kids to way too much. And you know who's going to pay the price? They were already paying the price for it. But you know who's going to really pay the price for it? We are. Those of us that allow society to get like this. Just keeping it real. We elected officials that are in office. We are the ones that buy different products to keep these companies in business. We are the ones that watch these different TV shows and different programs to keep these programs moving. We are the ones, and I'm guilty of this, that bought different music when I was younger because I loved it. I thought it was cool and it had great beats and stuff like that, and it told a story. And I realized at the time that it was degrading to my people, degrading to my society, taking our men back, taking our women back. And I didn't realize that I was playing into that when I was doing that. But now that I realize and I understand, I cannot continue in that vein. It's a form of repentance. Lord, I know that was wrong. I repented of that thing. I'm walking away from that thing. Every adult knows that they didn't really grow up until their late 20s or 30s. You were still making mistakes in your late 20s and 30s, you know, but that's when you really feel like you're starting to grow up, right? Some people never grow up. So I'm just saying, you know, we're doing these kids bad when we allow them to do those things. When you grow up, you can do whatever you want to do. But why should you have to try to force the issue now and then regret it later on? Because majority of the time that it happens, and then the children end up regretting it, and you can go research this. I encourage you to go research this. Research how many children that have had transitions that are falling into depression, not feeling accepted, still in the same position they were in beforehand. And then Google how many of them committed suicide. It's a horrific number. It is very sad. It should not happen. But the fact of the matter is it does. And with that being said, whether a person is transgender or gay or straight or wherever else, I don't believe anybody should be bullied, period. I don't believe anybody should be bullied. I believe everybody should be able to live their life and enjoy their life. I'm not saying that a person should push their lifestyle up in everybody else's face, just like I should not push my lifestyle up in everybody else's face. However, people should not be made to feel like they're unsafe because of their sexual orientation or because of their gender. Because at the end of the day, it is not you that makes the decision if they're right or wrong. It is him, the Father, period. So we had an eclipse. Moving on now. Sorry, y'all, I don't like bullying. I don't. Whether I agree with a person's lifestyle or not, I still don't agree with people trying to attack people for that. I don't agree with that at all. I think people need to be able to live and be safe, and I'm more likely to defend the safety of somebody in that position than I am to agree with somebody else that's bullying them or causing them harm. So with that being said, moving on to the eclipse. We talked about the eclipse that happened April 8th, 2024, a few days ago, this past Monday, right? Now, it was two eclipses, 2017 and 2024, one in 2017, one in 2024, that made an X across the United States like this, right? And the centermost part was Carbondale, Illinois, Cairo, Little Egypt. And they call it Little Egypt, but it's Cairo, Illinois. It's in the same area, right? And then another area, it's not an actual city, but it's a small town called Rapture, which is also in that same area. It's kind of trippy. These eclipses went over 7 cities named Salem. The first one did, and this next one went in. When I say 7 cities named Salem, just to clarify that, it went over 7 cities named Salem, and only 5 of them, I believe, were in full totality. The rest were in the vicinity and had like 80 or partial, but nevertheless, it still touched a city named Salem. And then this last one touched 8 cities named Nineveh. We just talked about Nineveh and what happened to Nineveh, right? Now, that was a sign for America. But eclipses happen all the time. There's another eclipse. There'll be another eclipse coming up in October that we won't even see. That's below South America, you know, and that matters not to us in the sense of us seeing it. I think it matters more so in the time frame will be happening at that point in time because it's October, and we'll get to that one later on. That's not what I want to focus on. What I want to focus on is that in 2027 there will be another eclipse. Not here. It'll be in the Middle East. This eclipse will go through the Middle East. It will cross over through the top part of Africa, the northern horn of Africa, down through Egypt into the Middle East, right? Skirting Israel. 7 years after that eclipse, there's another eclipse in the Middle East. And it comes from the bottom and comes up right through Egypt, making the X, going off into the rest of the Middle East. When you look at the X right there, right above this X, right in this area, you'll see Israel. And the X makes its centermost point in Egypt. Now go back and read Exodus 4:8. In fact, go back and read chapter 4 of Exodus and see who they were talking to and what that was all about. Then you realize this whole thing about eclipses is deeper than you realize. And you realize we just had this last eclipse on 4:8, which is a sign of the future. And in this particular eclipse, that happens over there puts an X over there in that area, right in Egypt. And Egypt was the country talked about in Exodus 4:8. But yeah, alone from that. I'm just saying, that to me is another sign. Because at first that first eclipse happens in 2027, which is 3 years from now. So if that's a sign for them, I'm gonna leave alone from that. I'm just saying. And by the way, the book of Exodus, when the true Israelites made the Exodus out of Egypt, they did it in Nisan. Nisan is the first month of the year. We're in Nisan right now, according to the Hebrew calendar, not the Gregorian calendar, the Roman calendar that we use. The Hebrew calendar says Nisan 1 was the day after the eclipse. April 9th was Nisan 1. So we are in Nisan right now. And the Exodus happened in Nisan. So I find that kind of interesting. I'm going to continue going on, so I'm not taking too long here. By the way, Jesus' triumphal entrance into Jerusalem, that was also on Nisan too. But I'll leave it alone anyway. So, what's going on today? What's going on right now that people are nutting up about? Oh, yeah, well, we just had the eclipse, right? We've been talking about that. But how about San Andreas? Because all of a sudden now, in the last few days, everybody's talking about San Andreas and how they say, wait a minute, we could have an earthquake on San Andreas in 2024. Now, why would y'all say something like that? And why do you think that could be? Well, maybe it's perhaps a certain area of the San Andreas fault line, and it's really a system. It's not just one fault line. It's a system of faults, right? There's one area of the fault is Parkfield. Parkfield pretty much has an earthquake every 22 years, roughly, right? They all have a 6.0 range for the most part. Now, with that being said, like clockwork, each quake is 6.0. After so many quakes, you have one that's a lot larger. But for the most part, every quake is like a 6.0 or in that range. And it's happened like clockwork every 22 years. So yeah, that's why they're saying they believe it's going to happen this year, because all the signs leading up to the last few in that same area are the same exact signs they're seeing right now. And the time frame matches up because it's been 20 plus years now. So a 6.0 is not devastating unless it's in a certain area and it's very shallow. In this case, it shouldn't, because it's in the Parkfield area. However, what if it ends up being larger than a 6.0? What if it ends up being like one of those ones from the past, one of those spikes, right? Then ain't no telling what can happen. I don't know. I'm not going to get into speculate. Only God knows. But it's something to pay attention to. It's something to think about. I'm more concerned with the area where the X was from our last two eclipses over there in the middle of the country, Carbondale, Illinois, right there in the middle of the country. Because if you pay attention to some of the other videos I made, then you know that this same area where we have the X over the United States is the same area known as the New Madrid seismic zone. Now, for those that don't know, the New Madrid seismic zone is one of the most devastating seismic zones in our country. People talk about the San Andreas. They talk about Cascadia off the coast. We know about Oklahoma. We know about the Virginia quakes, stuff like that. But New Madrid is so powerful it'll make the Mississippi River run backwards. And it has. And it will again. The New Madrid seismic zone has produced some of the most powerful earthquakes our country has ever seen. I'm talking about the first one was like an 8.7, and that happened in December of 1811, followed by thousands more earthquakes over the next couple of months. But two more of those earthquakes were on that same range, because the first one was like an 8.7. The very next one was a 9-pointer or a 9.1. The third one in this series was in that same range of 9. Now, with that being said, in between the 8th, the 9-1, and the other 9, in between that 2-month period, there were thousands of earthquakes going on at that point. At least 2,000 earthquakes happened during that time period. A lot of them were 6 points and 7 points and stuff like that, but they weren't as devastating as the 8. Now, just to give you an idea, if you don't know already, the power and shaking of an earthquake, when you go from one point of magnitude to another point of magnitude, it isn't just going up a little bit. If you go from a 5-point to a 6-point, that's not a little increase, that's a doubling. So for those of us that are used to have felt 5-pointers and 6-pointers and like, wow, that's a little freaky, right? It's nothing compared to a 7-pointer or an 8 or a 9. An 8 or a 9 will shake your house off the foundation. The 9 will shake the entire city off of its foundation. The 9 in the right area will split land apart. When the quakes happened in New Madrid back in 1811 and 1812, they made the Mississippi River run backwards. They felt the bells in on the East Coast of Philadelphia were ringing, and they felt it in San Francisco on the West Coast. That's how powerful these quakes were. Made the Mississippi River run backwards and actually reformed the Mississippi in that area. It actually reshaped it and whatnot. So, but it's just that powerful. You had tsunamis inundating cities, small tsunamis coming off the river, getting inundated with water because of what shaking was going on. People have no idea how bad it was. Now, back then when it happened, you didn't have a lot of people living in that area. Now you have 15 to 20 million people living in direct, New Madrid seismic zone area that are directly impacted if another major quake happens in that area. When another major quake happens in that area. Because New Madrid is coming due. New Madrid is clock, just like the Hayward fault, just like Parkville we talked about earlier. New Madrid is clock. And when I say clock, it means it pops on time. It pops on time. It might be late by a couple of years, but a couple of years is nothing when you talk about earthquake, because that's like a couple seconds in our time. It pops like clock, and New Madrid is going to pop soon. I can't say it's going to be within the next 5 years, next 10 years. I can't tell you that's not going to be within the next year. I don't know that. Only the Father knows. But I tell you this, if you see an X over this area, now backtracking to January, there was a whole lot of activity right next to it in Oklahoma. And Oklahoma just kept having all these little quakes. And this is a seismic area as well. They couldn't understand why they were having so many quakes. Then New Madrid started having little tremors here and there. More and more rolling. But a lot of them so small and so far on ground, you really don't feel it. But when you see all that activity happening on the smaller frame, you kind of got to pay attention to it, see what's going on. Eventually, not now. I'm not saying now. I don't think this is going to happen now. I wouldn't even venture to say it's going to happen anywhere in the next few thousand years as far as quakes on the New Madrid seismic zone go. But eventually, the New Madrid seismic zone, those quakes will eventually split the United States in half. You'll have this region, you have that region. That's what that zone is there for, and that's what it's going to do. And anybody that's been really doing a really diligent study on that sees that they realize this fault line is a lot deeper than they realize, and it runs a lot further south than they realize. The New Madrid seismic zone is in this one region, but it spiders and connects with other fault lines that run all the way down to the Gulf. Now, with that being said, a lot of stuff going on. We done talked about wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes in diverse places, eclipses. We're not even going to get into Pons, Brooks P92, the Devil's Comet. I've talked about that a ton. Y'all should have saw that during the eclipse. We could talk about the one planet that they lost, that they found back in 2017 was the last time they really saw it. They found it not too long ago, a few decades ago, but then 2017 was the last time they saw it, and they say it could come close to Earth in 2024, but nobody knows where it's at. How do you lose a planet or a giant object or a giant asteroid that's the size of 2 states? How do you lose that in orbit? It's easier than you think, because we have no clue about space or how deep and vast space is. But they said that this thing could come pretty close to Earth in 2024. We'll see what happens. I just know this much. While you see all this bad stuff happening, all this crazy stuff happening, you're going to also see one of the biggest revivals in the history of revivals. And the proof is in the pudding. Google what's going on in those other countries. Google North Korea and the people coming to Christ in North Korea. Google South Korea and the people coming to Christ in South Korea. And now Christ has been in South Korea. But to have people coming to Christ in North Korea where they know they can be beheaded, that's monumental. Even during this war that's going on in Israel, you still have people down there coming to Christ. You've got people in Iran coming to Christ, in Afghanistan coming to Christ. You got people all over the world starting to come to Christ. And I'm not saying the whole world is turning to Christ. That was a different story. We push all this stuff back. We wouldn't have to worry about stuff, but let's face it, the world is going the other direction. But you'll see people coming to Christ during his last days, and you'll see a last days revival like never before. And even in the book of Acts, chapter 2, verse 17, it says, in the last days, I will pour out my spirit on the people, He talks about how people will prophesy. Hold on. I will pour out my spirit on every kind of people. Your sons will prophesy, also your daughters. I cannot read. Your young men, your sons will prophesy, also your daughters. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. I should know that by heart because I've said it a million times, but I want to make sure I say it right there. So you're seeing that nowadays. There's tons of people having dreams about the rapture, about tribulation period, stuff like that they've never had before. People don't even know who God is, I've had those dreams since I was a kid, so it's nothing new for me. Everything that's happening right now, it seems to excite me because this is something I've studied all my life. It's something God talked to me about all my life. So to see it happening, to see things come to fruition, to see Bible prophecy happening before my eyes, yes, I'm excited. Yes, I'm flipping out. Am I worried? Not a doggone tick. I am not worried. You know why? I know who my Lord and Savior is. Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ. I know who my Father is. I know the sacrifice that was made to bring us all back to him. And I know that I need to be serving him with every ounce of my being. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm serving the Father, spreading the word, and letting people know what time it is. No time like the present to get into your word and really start talking to him and start praying to him and trying to figure out what's going on. You want to know what's going on, because before you can protect yourself in any other way, you have to have that spiritual protection. And the spiritual protection that you need can only come from God. And he gets it. He doesn't expect us to be perfect. He doesn't expect us to be a perfect life. I mean, he made us. He knows what time it is. He know we're going to fail. He know we're going to fall. He know we're going to mess up from time to time. But if we're smart, we should know that he will always accept us back. He will always love us. He will always wipe the dirt off our wounds. He will always comfort us and love us back to health. He's that type of God. If we could be a quarter of that type of child to him, man, it'd be awesome. So with that being said, Last Days Navigator, pay attention to what's going on. Pay attention to the signs. I'm not saying the world's going to heck in a handbasket tomorrow, but I'm saying when the switch happens, it's going to happen very quickly. Make no mistake about it. April 8th, we entered a new phase. We have entered a new phase. You're going to start to see a whole lot of acceleration sooner rather than later. When it does accelerate, be prepared. Check out some of my other videos so you can understand why I say you need to be prepared. And you can learn how to prepare and what you need to be prepared for. We already covered some of those things we need to be prepared for, but we haven't touched the surface. Bible prophecy is deep. Bible prophecy is cool. I love Bible prophecy as God speaking to us, letting us know, see, I told you this was going to happen. He shouldn't have to show us this stuff for us to believe in him. He shouldn't have to give us signs in order for us to say, you know what, God, you're real. Because if we're really paying attention, we see him in everything. And we see him in all facets and areas of our lives. And if we're not, then we ain't really seeing him. Last Days Navigator.